As things start to settle down, let me welcome you, friends, to another webinar in our series on educating educators on the best way to use Gameplan, how to bring it into your classroom, how to use it to engage your kids, and ultimately, hopefully, make your life easier as well. So, as we get started here, my name is Chris Aviles. I've been a teacher here in New Jersey for 20 years. I would say about a decade of that has been in the game-based learning space, gamification, esports. Not only have I coached middle school and high school esports team, even a college team now at this point I just started helping out with. But ultimately, the intersection of gaming and education is really my point of passion. So much so that during the pandemic, I founded an esports league for a way to help kids stay connected called Garden State Esports. And we've since grown it into one of the largest scholastic esports leagues in the country. So we have about 400 schools, 22 colleges, 14,000 kids who play, in our esports league. And what's exciting about that is the value that schools are seeing from esports after school is really something special, from an increase in attendance to an increase in connection to school, sense of belonging, school spirit, pride, all things that we're really excited about. And I would say over the last probably 2 years or so, at least in New Jersey, where I think the esports and education space is a little bit more evolved, I've actually had schools asking me, okay, we love this after school. What does this look like during the day? How can we bring it into our classrooms and use video games as the vehicle for engagement like we're doing after school for so many kids? And that's actually how I became part of the Game Plan team, is the educators that run Garden State Esports with myself. Most of us were teaching some sort of video game design class, esports elective, and we were looking for ways to share our lesson plans that we had with, schools really kind of just in New Jersey. But I ran into Game Plan and I got to know the team over there, from Pia to Rasmus to Jonathan to Boas and everybody else. And it just is a top-notch company that I was really excited to get the opportunity to join. And I wear a lot of hats over there, which is why I get the weird title of product evangelist. So I spend time writing curriculum, I spend time doing PD, I spend time doing webinars, but ultimately, kind of through the landscape that is my educational careers, I'm just trying to help educators do really cool stuff for kids. And it's funny when I talk about, why game plan, why games, it really is simple. It's fun, they're fun, and learning should be fun. And so we can engage and teach kids through a variety of different mediums, right? Movies, pop culture, whatever the case may be. But to me, gaming is one of the few universally adored hobbies, passions that students have. So kids from all walks of life play games, and for me, that's a great way to start to build a program and a curriculum. Because when you have a shared point of interest and you have an affinity space for students, I think that's what brings a lot of value, right, to the classroom. That's why I think game-based learning educators and schools who are brave enough to jump into this, they get a lot of value out of this. This really is something that is making a difference for a whole host of kids. So as product evangelists on Game Plan, I'm excited to share with you kind of how we can use games, how we can use Game Plan, right, to get those learning outcomes that we want for all of our kids. And so part of that, I'll tell you, is understanding the lesson structure of Game Plan. And what's exciting too is Game Plan is a company that has a whole host of educators working for it beyond myself, right? We have folks that taught at the high school level, the middle school level, the collegiate level. And so good teaching practice, right, is sown throughout what we do at Game Plan, right? Because good teaching is good teaching. And we want to make sure that we capture that. And so one of the things that we do is we make sure that we captivate our students right through our lesson structure. And, for me, it's something that I have used and something that I have piloted both on Game Plan when I was a teacher teaching with Game Plan for about 18 months, but even before Game Plan. And so it works. And that's this idea that we want to hook students, kind of with an introductory activity, explainer video, do now to get them excited. We then want to give them kind of the activity, the information that they need to understand what they're going to be learning. And really, most of the instruction in the classroom should be in small group or individualized work, right? We know that if you're teaching to the whole class probably isn't listening. So we make sure that we have quite a bit of project-based learning, small group instruction, and independent work for students, right? And then we make sure at the end of our lessons, we have some type of assessment to make sure that students can not only measure the growth, but also reflect on their growth as well, which we do through journaling. So we try to use a method of instruction that you would find in any classroom, right? Not just on the Gameplan platform. And so as we kind of talk about what that looks like, again, for my class, the way that I would always use Gameplan. What up, Don? Good to see you. What I've always enjoyed about Gameplan and the structure that I've always enjoyed using Gameplan in is something like this, basically a do now, right? I always would greet kids at the door, so that way I could stop any behavior issues before they came into my classroom. Because I was at the door, I needed something for students to do while they waited for class to start. So they had a do now for 5 minutes that they were working on before the bell, and a few minutes afterwards while I was taking attendance. And then I would start some whole class instruction, right? I would review the do now quickly, which was related to the topic of the day, or perhaps a review of what we learned the day before, right? But through that whole class instruction, no more than 10, 15 minutes, I am kind of trying to get kids excited for what we are learning that day. And that could look like a video, that could look like a discussion, that could look like, maybe more traditional, slideshow presentation where I am imparting some knowledge that they are going to need to be successful in today's lesson. But ultimately, where I would spend a majority of my time is blended learning. And blended learning on Gameplan would make up most of my class. And for me, right, was a great teaching strategy to engage the most kids, right? Because students, when they're working, when they're the ones in the driver's seat, they're the ones who are doing the learning, right? And then I would wrap it up, exit ticket style. What did you learn? If kids were making something, which they usually were, because the nature of Gameplan and the type of instruction that I enjoy is project-based learning. So we would whip around and we would get updates, and people would share what they were working on and show off things that they had made. And then we talk a little bit about what we're going to do next class as kind of a level set and a preview. And that was the structure that I used. And so for me, one of the things that I always share, again, because at the heart of what I do is education and being the best I can for students, Gameplan is a tool. Gameplan is not meant to replace the teacher. It is meant to make your life easier and to make learning for students better. And so, right, when we talk about using the tool that is Gameplan, I always like to show some really cool features that I'm not sure that every educator is aware that we have. And so as I transition in a second to sharing my screen, right, these are the topics that I wanted to make sure that I could show you. And so number one, right, is going to be talking about that tier one instruction. At least in New Jersey, tier one instruction is that whole class instruction, right? We're expected to do typically, like I said, 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes at most of tier one instruction. Overwhelmingly, right, we are expected to have small group and individualized instruction, which we'll talk about in a second. But when I jump into, let's see, here we go. When I jump over and share my screen, what I have here is I've gone into my Gameplan demo classroom. This is my game design class, something, I've taught game design for a long time. And let's take, for example, this lesson that I have here for students. When I open up the lesson, I can see, what the lesson's about, and I can see all the different parts to the lesson. I can see the teacher instructions and, different things that, Gameplan has ready out of the box, but also that I could potentially edit if I needed to. But specifically, what I wanted to show is make sure that when we talk about, right, that tier one instruction, when we're talking to the whole group, Gameplan has a present mode and interactive activities that is very similar to Pear Deck. And so if you're a Pear Deck user, you know that Pear Deck is a great way to engage your students. They basically answer questions or follow along with the slideshow or the lesson on their own personal devices. So they're on a Chromebook, I'm up at the whiteboard, and I am able to basically engage them in what I think is an exciting, interesting way, right? And I'll tell you why for a second, but let me show you what that looks like. So here I have today's lesson where they're talking about it. And so you'll see that it kind of scrolls up and down. But when I go to present lesson, so imagine I'm in front of the classroom, what that opens up is almost this slideshow like style of information that I can impart on kids, right? So again, we have today's lessons. I can still scroll down a little bit, but now that I'm in present mode, what really is kind of cool is if they're following along with the lessons, you'll see that I have a poll question here. And when I go into present mode, you'll see that it takes the poll and it hides the answers from students. And very similar to Pear Deck, what I can do is I can engage the kids, talk to them. I can say, okay, here's what we're working on today, or let's go over the do now. Here's the poll question. Let me know what you guys think, right? What aspect of game development are you most excited to learn about? And their answers as they follow along, right, on their Chromebooks or something like that, is hidden. So they could do this as a do now. They're not going to see what everybody is saying until it's time for the big reveal. And so, again, in present mode, when I want to make that reveal for students, I could hit that show answers tab, and then we would see, right, the percentages that students answered and their thoughts and feelings. Right. What I like about this from a teaching standpoint is really twofold, right? One of the things that makes this a powerful tool beyond helping kids pay attention during what is traditionally the most boring part of a class, that's the slideshow. It also gives the opportunity for a teacher to hear from more students and to give a voice to students who are maybe a little bit more introverted, right? Because when I ask the question, hey, what aspect of game development are you most excited to learn about? Instead of all the hands going up, hopefully, and I call on them and I hear their answers, I'm actually going to pause. I'm going to give some teaching time, right? Maybe 2-3 minutes. I'm going to have them answer through Gameplan, and then I'm going to reveal the answers. So number one, that means I'm not just relying on A, kids to raise their hand. B, I'm not relying on 2 or 3 kids to raise their hand. Everybody is expected to answer. Everybody's expected to contribute. So number one, right, I'm getting more out of my kids. Number two, if they are a little bit more introverted and maybe they don't want to ever raise their hand, right, they still have the opportunity to respond, right? Because we have more than polls. We have discussion questions, we have journals, right? All that can be used in this manner. So I love the fact that I can appeal to different types of kids, and then I can also get more engagement out of my kids, right, using something like this feature. And again, it's just as simple as, when you're up in present mode in front of the class, flipping the toggle says show answers, or, again, it will reveal the journal answers. It would reveal the, short answers, whatever style question that you work into your lesson. And the other part too is when I flip back to my slideshow, I'm a huge present fan, right? The way that mode works. And I love these interactive activities. And again, it really looks like, to me, it functions a lot like Pear Deck, which I've always been a big fan of Pear Deck. But you also say, you'll see that I said, okay, let's use edit mode to customize the hooks to meet your needs, right? And so that's the other thing I always find myself during Gameplan PD talking about quite a bit, is the understanding that you are going to get lessons ready to go. I hate the term turnkey, but basically, whether you're an educator who has a background in game design or has never taught game design before, right, you can deploy this in your classroom and be very successful. But again, Gameplan is not a tool to replace the teacher. That is not ever going to be our goal. But what our goal could be, right, what our goal that we can aim for, especially if we are not an expert in the subject matter of gaming, game design, that kind of stuff, is to slowly make our lessons our own, right? To slowly make our course our own. So I can tell you the first time I taught on Gameplan, I taught the esports introduction semester-long course. I taught it straight out of, the box. I said, let me see what this is like. Let me see what their version of an elective that I've taught for, at that point, 8 years. And it was great, right? But I also found myself missing some of my favorite lessons that I had done. I also found myself wishing I could customize and make the content more of my own, more related to my kids, my demographic. New Jersey, East Coast, Title I school, Central Jersey is a thing. We're 15, 20 minutes off the beach, right? So just like you, we have our own culture, right? My school had its own feel, and I wanted to make sure that my lessons not only reflected my school culture, but also reflected my personality as a teacher. because I, teach a certain type of way. Like you heard at the top of the show, my passion for Fallout, right? I've gamed since I was, I think 5 or 6 years old. So the language of gaming is something that I'm very comfortable with, and to be able to work that in, really so the kids think I'm cool, which they never did, was always something that I was interested in. And so the idea is whenever you are comfortable, know that you can edit everything in Gameplan. If you don't like a link, if you don't like an opening, if you don't like any part of this, right, you can change it to meet your needs. Or conversely, if you love it and you want to lean into it and you want to add more stuff, or I always found myself, I would extend lessons, especially, for instance, we have a lot of great content around Unreal Engine, especially design your own 3D game. And I constantly found myself expanding the lessons to have more stuff because the kids loved to design their own game. So, I would go and find ways to help them. I think I wrote a lesson about making a main menu or how to take the game from a level 1 and to make, like this little portal that you could walk through to start a level 2. And then they could design a whole second level, right? And just by hitting the edit button, I have the ability to customize the content, which to me is fantastic. So I could say, welcome to, probably should go with Mr. Aviles' classroom, right? So I can, customize this to be about me. And you'll see that I have the ability as I work through to, move stuff around. I can insert things, right? So if I wanted to come down here, I wanted to add media, table, text divider, text container, divider, puzzle. If I wanted to add questions, right? Single select, multi-select, right? Short answers. If I wanted to add polls like you saw here. If I needed to add a block of coding, which I found myself doing sometimes, because if you ever taught with Unreal Engine, that sometimes they change stuff in the, we'll call, I guess, the asset folder or the things that you get from fab.com. But they don't obviously update their videos all the time. So I would have to go through and, if they change the name of a file or they change the location of the file, I would have to go through and give new code or give the new directory so that way the kids could find what they were doing. I can even do something like a downloadable, right? If I wanted them to use a specific asset that wasn't too big, I can actually have it, set up in Gameplan. So I had the ability at any point to customize my content. And what was great is as I would customize my content, I'm going to leave without saving so I don't get in trouble. But my content then shows up, right, in my course library. These are the out-of-the-box, game plan pieces of content that we have. But when you go to my content, you would have your classroom lessons, right? So the lessons that we were just working on, as well as, different courses. Every time you edited, or I should say, once you made an edit to a classroom, you actually were making a copy of the course for yourself. And what I loved about that is imagine that throughout the semester, I would make edits and I would change the course to better meet my needs as a teacher. Well, when that semester is over and you go to my content, the stuff that you had edited, the course that you had made was now here. And you can then duplicate the course, you can then schedule the course. But basically, semester 2, you were using the copy of the course that you personalized during semester 1. During semester 2, you make that even better. You add more things to it. You add more current events or things that you think are relevant. And then that copy of the semester 2 course now becomes your semester 3 course. And what you're always carrying forward is the best version of the course, the most updated version of the course. And I always loved that as, what I would consider myself as a power user. Is it great out of the box? 100%. Is it ever going to be as good as the teacher's own personalized version of the content of Gameplan? Never, right? Because again, we're not a tool to replace the teacher. We are a tool to empower the teacher. And what better way than allowing you to constantly update and personalize, right, your content and making it as easy as possible for you to then deploy, next semester, next week, whatever the case may be, right? Whether you're doing it on a lesson level, you're doing it on a unit level, or you're doing it on a course level. And so when we talk about, right, teaching tips for Gameplan, that tier 1 instruction is knowing that present mode comes with interactive activities. which I think are a lot of fun, and knowing that you can edit and customize any part of a lesson, right, to make it better meet your needs. And through that, then, let's say that I extend a lesson, I can go back and I can show things again via present mode, and overall just give a more engaging 10 to 15 minutes of whole class instruction, right? So that's some teaching tips for tier 1. Tier 2, and what I wanted to mention is beyond the ability to add some of those questions that I showed you, right? Single choice, multiple choice, fill in the gap, stuff like that. Oh, come back. Where'd you go? Over here on the right, you can see the different lesson activities that we have. Journal, survey. We can actually have aim labs, drills, if your school is so equipped. Quizzes, discussion boards, review scenarios, and record and review, which is basically, these are really cool. Record and review scenario is when you as a teacher or the students upload video, and then you each have the ability, right, depending on which one you choose, record and review. You could potentially go through something like a VOD, and you can review it as the coach, and you can tell us straight and right on top of it. Or review scenario, right? Similarly, you can create a video. You can make it so students can't jump forward. You can make it so students have to answer questions at certain points in the video, and they can't, move forward in the video until they answer those questions. And if it sounds like Ed Puzzle, it should, because it's designed to be very similar to Ed Puzzle meets Huddle, right? Huddle being the very popular sports app. If you've ever coached football or even wrestling and basketball, you know that Huddle allows you to upload your videos, and then with the team in mind, be able to do a talk session, be able to illustrate the plays. So record and review and review scenario give you the ability to tap into a Huddle-like experience where you work with students, and a Ed Puzzle type of experience where students have to complete, questions, checks for understandings, responses on a video that either comes from the Gameplan library, or you can upload your own video content. On top of that, we have exams, assignments, drills, and a lot of fun stuff that, again, we believe in project-based learning. You can construct your own projects or extend our projects, which I think is really exciting. So just wanted to mention, I guess, that is some of the interactive learning that you can incorporate to, right, what you're doing while you are blending with Gameplan, which is that tier 2 instruction. Again, in Jersey, we are highly encouraged to spend most of our class in a small group, individualized. Hard to get away from blended learning when that's the goal. But I don't know if I would say blended learning is the norm, but I would definitely say it is very popular here in New Jersey. But basically what we're going to do is, when it comes time for students to show what they know, to show what they have learned, or otherwise practice or complete an activity, right, Gameplan makes it easy to do so in a blended learning fashion. And if you've never heard of blended learning, the easiest way to think about it is in person, classroom-based, synchronous instruction that incorporates elements of online learning and technology-enhanced pedagogies. And that sounds like a mouthful, but let me paint a picture for you about what blended learning may look like. And so let's take a great example. Let's talk about some of the Unreal Engine activities we have on Gameplan, right? It would be very difficult to do whole class instruction and work students through the guided activity as the teacher in front of the classroom. Because you can imagine something like learning Unreal Engine and making your own video game. Students are going to be at a variety of levels of understanding, even more so than we might see with maybe a little bit easier content. Having taught, again, with Unreal Engine and game design, I have kids who take a long time to understand. I have kids who get it almost instantly and are ready to go and do other stuff. And then I have a bunch of kids who are kind of like, they start off a little bit slow, but then it snowballs and they understand. Right. A tale as old as time as a teacher is, how do we reach every kid and give them the tools they need to be successful? And one of those ways, right, is blended learning. Because instead of standing in front of the class, in front of 24 kids, all trying to do 24 different, design your own video game lessons with 24 different levels of understanding, what I'm instead going to do is I'm going to set the stage during whole class instruction, and I'm going to let kids know, hey, today you are going to be watching a video that walks you through how to do some of the steps in this game design lesson. You're going to watch the video again on your own, or if I'm doing like small group, maybe groups of 2, like you're going to watch the video together. You're going to do what the video says. If you have a question, rewind the video, watch it again. If you have a question after rewinding it a few times, ask your partner, ask a friend, right? Then ultimately, right, to help combat learned helplessness, maybe you ask me after you do those things, right? Because the idea is, between Google videos on Gameplan and the friends and classmates in and around them, students have most of what they need to be successful. And I find a lot of times too, is as a teacher doing whole class instruction, kids have a sense of learned helplessness sometimes, where they will watch a video, don't understand, probably because they're not paying total attention, and they're just going to raise their hand, and they're not going to do anything until you as the teacher comes up to them. Now, when you're the teacher and you got 24 kids with their hands in their air, how you get to everybody, how you help everybody, it's exhausting, right? And so for me, number one, setting the culture of, hey, that video is going to say exactly what I would say if I was standing in front of you, right? And even as an English teacher, I use this all the time, right? Think about a thesis statement, right? A thesis statement is one of the very first things you learn as a student in my English class. And a thesis is relevant the entire school year. So as an English teacher, even before I got into gaming and before I got on Gameplan, I would always make a video that explained what a thesis statement was and gave a couple examples. And anytime kids had a question about a thesis statement, they knew at the time I had a YouTube library that they could go and they could find the questions that they needed answered if I was with another student, if I was busy, whatever the case may be. So instead of sitting with their hand in the air waiting for me in December to ask me what a thesis statement was that we went over in September, kids knew that those videos existed, right? When you think about blended learning, it's very cool because the teacher takes on a support role in the classroom as students move through content at their own pace, right? Blended learning, recording the core, right, or using the game plan videos to give the core piece of education that students need for the lesson. I love it because it allows me to be everywhere at once. Everybody has their own personal version of Mr. Aviles in front of them. They know that they have the tools and they're allowed to Google the answer. They know that they can rewind the video. They know that they can ask their friends near them or around them for help. But ultimately, giving them the tools they need to be successful, because I have found, right, you add those things and then extra time, and that's really most of what a kid needs. And what's great is, as kids are watching the video, as they're Googling answers, as they're answering each other, I am making my way around the classroom and I'm checking in with every student. The only time I've ever been able to check in with every student as a teacher is in a blended learning classroom, because kids have 90% of what they need to be successful. And a cool extra bonus is, let's say that they're home writing the essay or they're working on their game plan lessons at home. Well, think about why so many students struggle with homework. The teacher is not there at the time when they need the teacher the most, right? They're working on something at home. Maybe they go to their parents. There's a good chance maybe that their parents don't understand the game design work that you're doing, or they haven't had to write a thesis, in a long time. Or ultimately, right, just with the way things are today, they're probably busy and tired and working multiple jobs to make ends meet. By recording and using video and blended learning, you give kids what they need when they need it. And so I have been a huge advocate of blended learning, and you can see the role that blended learning plays throughout most of the lessons that we have here in Gameplan. And that's this idea that we provide videos throughout the activities that students can work on in small groups or independently, which ultimately frees you up as a teacher to do a lot more meaningful things other than repeat yourself 24 times to 24 different kids, right? And so to give you a real quick kind of example is we have throughout our lessons, right? We have throughout our lessons a video like this, a video that is informative. And I would argue that a video like this um, is even great to show during direct instruction, right? Hey, we're going to play this video together. It's going to tell us about graphics. We're going to have a conversation. Then you're going to complete, right, the different activities. Um, but then take something like a Unreal Engine, create your first 3D game, and let's go to collision detection, right? Again, maybe you've never taught Unreal Engine before. Maybe you have no idea what collision is, right? The beauty is we lay it out in a text-based format with some support structure for the students, but then we actually have right appropriately chunked. You'll see this video is about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. But this video will walk students through what they need to do, not just to be successful in the lesson, right, but successful in completing, let's call this checkpoint one, and then checkpoint two, checkpoint three. While students are watching the videos, again, I'm moving about the classroom, supporting them, answering questions to the best of my ability. But they also now have the tools to be successful. They can Google it, they can watch the video, they can rewatch the video, they can ask a partner, ask a friend. And now you have the whole class working independently, working in small groups, which ultimately to me leads to better student engagement because kids, again, have the ability to try. And so you'll see that throughout, our lessons on game plan, right? Uh, Teachers have the tools that they need to not only use what we've created for them, but also the tools, right, to make their own content should they want to add more blended learning to it. And I think one of the things, finally, to touch on when it comes to blended learning and why, keeping whole class instruction to 10, 15 minutes and then relying on videos to help students move at their own pace through content is it really does reduce a ton of classroom management issues. Because I would make an argument that a classroom management is usually the result of two or maybe three things. One is a student who feels like they cannot keep up and understand what's going on. So imagine if I explained verbally or with some pictures or even doing it and sharing my screen to the projector. Hey, here's what you're going to do to turn on collision detection in Unreal Engine. Well, if that student didn't understand it the first time I did it, that's where their struggle then is like, well, I don't understand. And now I also don't have the tools that I need to be successful. And the only person who can help me is the keeper of knowledge, the teacher, but they're busy with 22 other kids and they're never going to get to me. They're never going to be able to help me, right? Blended learning solves that. And it helps reduce classroom management issues because number one, right, less frustrated students. Number two, if a student moves quickly through a lesson, let's say that, looking at this lesson around collision detection, maybe they've used Unreal Engine before and maybe they're familiar with it and they fly through this very quickly. Well, here's the great thing, right? Using blended learning, they can then move on, right? Using game plan and blended learning to the next activity, right? You now don't have to hold kids all in the same place. You can have them move on, right, when they are ready. So that way we're supporting kids who need help when they need it, but then we're also giving kids, right, the high flyers who are getting done quickly, we're giving them the opportunity, right, to move on with their content through the content at their own pace. And so for me, what I would always do, right, and game plan makes this super easy is if I jump back into game plan and I go to, let me go to the classrooms and let me jump into game design and let me back up my calendar right to these lessons here. I would usually assign my stuff for students, which is really easy. I click on my edit schedule button. I can see I have these two lessons, right? I would generally give more content per week excuse me, I would give my content on a weekly basis, and I would check in with students each day that they had class. And they would basically know, right? Because again, I'm still in the classroom, I'm still the teacher, but they would basically know as students, well, where they should be on what day, right? And so I grab some Unreal Engine content and I get my first 3D game, and you can see a total, right, of, these lessons here made up of different activities. I maybe will assign 4 this week. And I'm going to assign, let's assign them, same days every week, or let's do all on the same day. And the first day will be February. Let's make it today, and I'll schedule it. So what I could do is basically tell them, let's pretend we're off on Monday. Hey, when you guys come in on Tuesday, you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 lessons, and I need you to complete by Friday. Whatever pace that you do them on is totally up to you, but by Friday, these should be done. And then, maybe if you want to, there we go. I can move the lessons and I can show them one each day, right? Because game plan lessons are meant to be done in 45-minute clips or so. Let's say I have an hour class. Hey, by Friday, you need to do 1 lesson per day. These all need to be done by Friday, right? Or if I see them every day, right? Maybe I say, okay, hey, Tuesday, here's what we're doing. Thursday, here's what we're doing. On Friday, all 4 of these need to be turned in, right? To me, that is a really, that's a more engaging way to deliver content to students that embraces game day learning, right? Than what we're typically doing, which is making every student move through the pace, moving through content at the same pace. And so for me, right, again, it all goes back to reducing classroom management issues. I give them a certain amount of content to complete in a certain amount of time. They have videos that they can, use to help them move through the content. And if they understand, fantastic. They don't need a ton of teacher support. If they don't understand, well, maybe they do need some teacher support, and that's okay too. But I always loved, right, the balance when it came to classroom management. If you really want a fun way to experiment and see if you can help solve classroom management issues, is play around with this idea of giving up control when it comes through how quickly or slowly students work through content, right? And that's, again, like you just saw, that's one of the things that Game Plan makes really easy, is you can take a 45 minute group of lessons, and you can kind of see here what we offer through esports introduction. And you can lay that out instead of saying, oh, you have 1 lesson per day and this is due at the end of the day. You can say, hey, you have 4 lessons due this week. You have everything that you need to do them to be successful right now. Work as quickly as you can. And for me, right, what am I doing during this? Well, I'm circulating. I'm checking in with every kid, right? If they're rushing through the work, I know about it. If they're not doing the work at a pace that I believe that they're capable of, I'm talking to them about it. I reinforce direct instruction, right, from the video, from what we talked about as a whole class. I'm making sure, right, they understand. I'm asking them questions. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Tell me about that decision. I'm problem solving, providing resources, right? I'm very lucky that I have friends who are who work at Epic Games. I've had to go so far as to literally call somebody on FaceTime that works at Epic Games and help my kid solve a problem that I couldn't necessarily solve. I give feedback on what they're creating. I come around and, oh, guys, Pia made this unbelievable, jump in her video game. Look at this platform jump that she made. And I would show off what she was doing, right? And really build relationships, right? Because kids don't, right? What did Rita Pearson say? Kids don't learn from teachers they don't like, right? And one of the best things about blended learning, beyond giving kids options with how they go through the work and stuff like that, to me, is I get to check in with every kid in every class. And that means so much to me, because that's the time when I get to know my kids. That's the time that I get to ask them about after school sports. I get to ask them about their favorite video game, right? Because to me, I think that's a really great way, right, to engage with students. But how can I get to know my students if I'm only doing whole class instruction? If I'm right, up there talking for 60 minutes, how can I ever build relationships with my kids, right? So blended learning on Gameplan has really been top of mind from beginning, right? When they're working on these projects, when they are working independently, when they're working in small groups, right? We are hoping that as an educator, you are using that time not only to make your life easier and learning better for kids, but also build relationships, right? Because I'll never forget, I had a great professor when I was getting my master's degree. And one of the things that he would always say is, whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning, right? So as we sit here and hit 43 minutes in our webinar, know that the way that I'm presenting information to you at home is never the way that I would present information to my kids in class, right? 43 minutes is way too long to talk. But, you know, it's a great way to use Gameplan to bring blended learning in the classroom. It comes with so many benefits. And even, right, again, thinking about how Gameplan is a tool for the teacher, one of the things that we have, right, when you, let me show you how to get here. Let's say that you go into a classroom. So I'll take my game design class. I'll back up real quick and I'll go grab a lesson. When you grab a lesson, we actually have the ability, right, to look at the progress of each student in a lesson. And what I love about this is I always would look at this before my class started. And I would say, okay, I assigned this to them yesterday. And if they are, you know, it's a 2-day project, they should be halfway done. Well, using this on Gameplan, I can see, okay, who has completed the assignments, who has not completed the assignments, and who is still, you know, working on it or not started. It really is a very cool way, right, to be able to get a snapshot or a heat map of where kids are in the assignments that you've given, right? And so when I think about blended learning and when I think about who do I talk to first in a blended learning classroom, I'm looking for those kids that have not started. I'm looking for the kids where if they're halfway through, I'm expecting them to be down here on the progress bar, but in reality, they're still up here, right? Those are the kids I'm talking to first, because chances are they need the most support. And when you get to those kids that are high flyers and they are farther along in the content, that's where I'm saying, like, hey, show me what you did. What, you know, what experiment, what did you try? How did you do something different? And to me, it gives me a really good idea of who do I need to talk to first because they didn't start or they're not where they should be, versus who can I come see maybe toward the end. Or again, with my teacher hat on, sometimes I would flip it. A conversation with a kid who is advanced, is moving through the content quickly, is excited about the class, is a high flyer. That conversation can be a lot shorter, right, than typically a conversation with a kid who's struggling. So sometimes I would go talk to, you know, maybe the top 10 kids in the class who are really just kind of sailing through the work, and we're working on those anchor activities, which we'll talk about in a second. But, you know, I would then, you know, maybe I got through 10 students in 10 minutes. Hey, just checking in. I saw that you're high flying and I saw that you're way ahead. Let me see what you're working on. Oh, very cool. Tell me about this. And then, right, with the remaining 50 minutes, now I got 50 minutes to divide up about, you know, among the 12 kids that are maybe a little bit behind. So sometimes that's even the best way to go about it, is talk to your kids who maybe don't need that much support. Talk to them first. And that gives you the bulk of your class to work with kids who need your support. And sometimes I would just flip flop. One day I'd start with kids who are struggling. The next day I would start with kids, you know, who weren't struggling. But ultimately, the goal through blended learning is to make sure that I get to talk to every kid. And the way that I would prioritize what kid I talk to, right, would be, right, checking through this progress bar and getting an idea, snapshot, a heat map of who is where, who's struggling, who needs help. And even potentially doing something like, if I know that, you know, I have a student who is sailing through the content, really understands it, well, maybe I'm going to deputize him and he can help teach some of these kids that are struggling as well. And I would, right, here's a great tip about that. If you're going to have kids, especially in a project-based learning, game-based classroom where there's a lot of things to put your hands on, I would put them into coach mode. And what that meant is they literally had to put their hands behind their back. And they were not allowed to touch anything, because whether it's game design or in gaming or in esports, when you take a kid who is good at something, in a class like this and you say help somebody, a lot of the times they get frustrated and they just steal the mouse and keyboard. They steal the controller. And by making them put their hands behind their back, they have to verbally explain, right, what to do. And I have found that is a great way to work on a student's teamwork and leadership skills, but also help them with their patience, right? Because a lot of kids, in my experience, who are great at gaming and are good at these highly technical, highly skilled things like something like Unreal Engine, they could sometimes use a little bit of social skill development, some soft skill development. So, there's a lot of different options when it comes to deploying this in the classroom. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, right, is okay. It's easy to know what to do with kids who are struggling, right? You coach them up, you teach them up, you give them extra time, you explain things in different ways to them, you partner them up, you help them research, right? But a lot of times we don't have a plan for how we keep students who are done early on task. And if you've never heard of the teacher term, right, it is called anchor activities. And what an anchor activity is basically a special activity, usually has to come from, let's Bloom's taxonomy. It's usually got to come from that higher order creativity type of assignment. But basically, it is a culminating activity that is sometimes optional, but basically is something for them to work on that is fun and interesting while we wait for everybody else, right? And so the best example I could give, going back to continuing that example of a game design course, let's say that I gave them 2 weeks and they finished, level 1, which was, like a paint by numbers. Let's do this together. Everybody ends with the same game at the end of the 2-week period. What an anchor activity would be something along like, hey, you finished early. You learned all these really cool things about making a video game, but your video game looks like everybody else's because everybody did the same thing, right, to learn about how to make a game. Since you're done early, 2 days early, 1 day early, right, your mission is to go back and customize your game and make your game as cool as possible. And we would do things like game jams where everybody got to show off their game. And we would do things like, I would always try to find some extra time for everybody to get to freestyle and get creative with their game designs. But challenging kids to then remix, challenging kids to come up with creative things, that they could do based on what they've learned is really cool. And in Gameplan, a lot of our project-based learning obviously has checkpoints and things that they can be doing, but we've even added at the end of some of our units some anchor activities, so that way if you are using this method of blended learning, you can anchor your students down and have them build something special. And so some of our lessons around Lego Fortnite and the UN Sustainable Goals, some of our lessons around Minecraft, some of our lessons when it comes to Unreal Engine, we've made some anchor activities for design your virtual robot. We've made some anchor activities for 3D game design. But basically, knowing that you can edit your lessons on Gameplan, you are also, as the educator, empowered to make your own anchor activities, right? Because that's a big part of blended learning, is making sure if they're all moving at their own pace, what is the project, what is the activity that holds all the kids up, right? So as they finish the work, that anchor activity is what holds them before you start the next unit. But that anchor activity has to be creative. It has to be fun. It has to be collaborative. It has to be that higher order thinking stuff, like make, design, create, remix, improvise, present, that kind of stuff. So as we wrap it up here, I'm hoping that you guys are leaving with an understanding of how you can use Gameplan to not just improve your whole class instruction, right? Because we talked about sharing present mode. We talked about the Pear Deck style features of interactive activities. We talked about, the ability to remix and customize all Gameplan content, but especially that content for direct instruction to be a reflection of your school, your culture, your teaching style, and stuff like that. But then moving into, okay, if I'm only going to be talking to the whole class for 10 minutes, well, what am I doing, right, after that? And to me, it's it's blended learning. It's having the kids work independently, right? A lot of times through different technologies like video, right? Through the game plan platform. And basically, you as the teacher being able to be everywhere at once because they're working through content at their own pace, powered by videos, powered by, the game plan lessons, the way that we laid them out. And then ultimately, you have the ability, you have the ability to then, as the teacher, meet with every kid, and not just the kids who are struggling, but those kids who are being successful and exceeding expectations, and making sure that they're getting the most out of your class, as everybody else. And so, bringing in anchor activities, again, being able to edit your own content and customize it, make it your own. Because listen, game plan content is fantastic out of the box. Don't get me wrong. However, right, no content is ever going to be as good as teacher custom content, right? Your style, your culture should all be reflected in what you're presenting to kids. So tier 1 instruction, whole class, tier 2 instruction, blended learning on game plan. You can't beat it. It's really been fantastic. As somebody who, I've used blended learning and that style of instruction probably 15 years. I've taught in esports and gaming, game-based learning, game design, gamification for 10 years. If you're looking for a way to hook your kids and you're looking for a way to really engage students and again, understanding that video games is universally adored by everybody at this point, you really can't beat it with game plan. So I'll throw up my contact info. That's me. I'm Chris at gameplan.com. This webinar is going to be made available almost instantly as soon as I hit the end stream button. And my wonderful partner in crime, Pia, pushes it out on our social media and stuff like that, website. You guys will have access to it. But not only do you get a taste of what game plan looks like, how it works as part of the instructional day, which I feel like so many other companies leave out, right? We want to make sure you understand what this looks like as part of your instructional day. This is also a taste of what game plan PD is like. What better way to really make game plan work for your school and your kids than to bring in the product evangelist, Chris Aviles, to customize and make everything that you can work. And so boom, somebody told me to check my text messages, so I got Don and some friends in the chat as well, educators using game plan. But we're cool, we're good. So thank you as always for attending. Thank you for hanging out, whether you're in person. After you watch this toward the end, please reach out if you have any questions, if you'd like to talk more. This is really an area of passion, not just for myself, but everybody on the game plan team. And as always, thank you to my partner in crime, the one who makes all the webinars possible, the one who has everything in line and ready to go for us, Miss Pia, the best, my favorite person. Thank you, Miss Pia. And thank you, and have a great day.